My name is Gabrielle. I'm originally from the Phoenix area of Arizona, although I have lived in quite a few different states in the US. I moved to Mexico to live permanently in January of 2020. I'd studied here as a college student and lived with a Mexican family and did an immersion program in Spanish in the year 2000 and just fell in love with the culture, the country, and would return to visit multiple times a year for the last 23 years. And I got an opportunity to move here for a job in January of 2020, and I took it, and I've been here ever since, and I have no intentions of leaving. I choose Mexico City because it's the capital. It's cosmopolitan. I'm a big city girl. I've lived in Boston. I've lived in DC. I've lived in LA, and I just love everything that it has to offer. I also love the fact that the airport is very accessible. It's close to Cuernavaca, the city that I studied abroad in. So I actually have what I call my Mexican family there, and I can spend time with them on the weekends if I need to or want to. I did have some job offers in Monterrey and Querétaro, but I didn't feel they were the right fit for me, for my lifestyle, for what I wanted in a place to live. I really wanted to be able to walk, to have mass transportation, to have cultural activities, to have pretty much everything at my fingertips. And Mexico City, being one of the largest cities in the world, definitely gives me that opportunity. So I rent an apartment in a neighborhood called San Miguel Chapultepec. Originally, when I moved into this apartment, the job that I had subsidized part of my rent. So it was a little bit easier to get the apartment than had I gone out on my own. But I did use a couple different websites, and I just walked around the neighborhoods that I was interested in living in and looked for rent signs. After I left that job, I renewed my lease with the landlords, and I had to provide 2 months rent up front and pay what is called a póliza, like an insurance policy, that in case I were to back out of the contract, the landlords would have the rent paid through the end of the contract, or at least until they found another tenant, is my understanding of how that works. I chose this neighborhood initially because of its location to my work. It's kind of, some people like to call it the most centrally located city in Mexico. I mean, neighborhood in Mexico City. I don't agree with that, but it does allow you to get to the outskirts of Mexico City, where a lot of the private schools and things are, which is where I was working, and also be very centralized. But one of my main things about this neighborhood that I loved was its vicinity to parks. I have 3 dogs. moved to the apartment with one. I have collected 2 more since. And just the fact that there's mass transit. I have a metro stop 2 blocks away. I'm very close to some of the more popular expat neighborhoods, so I can walk over there, but then come back to my little oasis. I like to call my apartment the tree house with all the trees surrounding it. And what I really love about my neighborhood specifically, it's very, very neighborly. The downstairs neighbors are actually the owners of the building. Across the street, I have a coffee shop that, they accept neighbors' packages from Amazon. They have keys to our apartments. It's not overwhelming, and it's really quiet, especially for a city that is smack in the middle of, especially for a neighborhood that's smack in the middle of the city. And the greenery is fabulous. So those are some of the things that I really, really like about this neighborhood. So when looking for a rental in Mexico City, there are a couple different routes you can go. A lot of people come here looking for short-term rentals, which is pretty challenging to do. You need subletting isn't really allowed here. So you would need to do some sort of an Airbnb or find someone that can do an exchange with you, something like that. If you're looking for a long-term rental, which long-term here is 1 year or more, you oftentimes are required to have a residency and or a bank account in Mexico City or in Mexico. Sometimes landlords you don't require it. It just really kind of depends. Online websites for rentals aren't always necessarily the most accurate or don't have the most updated information. One of the things that really shocks people when they move to Mexico City about renting is that you need to have what is called an aval, which is basically a cosigner that owns property in Mexico City, which is even challenging sometimes for locals. So even more challenging for foreigners. And sometimes what you can do is you can negotiate with the landlord to say, pay 3-month deposit. For example, that's what I did when I was laid off from my job. I wanted to renew, so I gave them 3 months up front, and they allowed me to renew without the school as my cosigner. Those are some things that really throw people off. It's just not expected, and it's challenging. I mean, I don't know how a foreigner would come here already knowing someone owns property in Mexico City that would then be willing to sign for them. But there are a couple companies that have started popping up that specifically work with apartment owners that don't require the aval, or the company serves as the cosigner. And then, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, the polisa, also the insurance policy, is something that a lot of landlords require. And that can cost between 150 to up to 450, 500 US dollars or equivalent in pesos. So those are some things to keep in mind, some expenses that you wouldn't necessarily find in in the US. I'm not really familiar with renting in other countries, but things that you wouldn't necessarily find in the US. You'll also find that there's a lot of pet-friendly places. Mexico City is a very pet-friendly place. So if you have an animal, it's easier to find a pet-friendly apartment than in some other places that I've lived in my life, for sure. So where I live, San Miguel Chapultepec, it is what is considered a solid middle-class Mexican neighborhood. It used to be a lot of governors. All the streets are named after governors. And so there's some really cool houses that have been converted into apartments, things like that. It's a really pretty neighborhood, but it is considered a more local neighborhood. If you want to go into a shop or a coffee shop, you're going to want to have a pretty decent command of Spanish in this neighborhood. There's a lot of resources here. I have a beautiful little fruit vegetable shop right up the street. There's a big market called El Chorrito, which is actually pretty known in the city, that you can get basically anything that you need. We also have a Soriana, which is a main grocery store. 7-Eleven. My biggest maybe gripe about this neighborhood is that we don't have enough restaurants. Everything is more like little fondas and things like that. And I would love to see a couple more restaurants in the neighborhood, but then not too many. But it's a solid neighborhood. We have solid Wi-Fi. I work from home a lot. Electricity here is great. We've had some outages during major rainstorms. I haven't had that in a couple of years, but we also haven't had the rain that we've had in the past. And like I mentioned, the fact that it's so green, there's parks surrounding. It's surrounded by Chapultepec Park. I have 2 churches that I can choose from on Sundays that are walking distance. What else? It's a pretty quiet but pretty. It's like a little oasis in the city, and I love it because I have everything that I need, and if I don't want to, I don't need to leave the neighborhood for anything. But at the same time, could definitely, oh, at the same time, I could definitely find other things that the neighborhood could have to offer that you find the neighborhood's kind of lacking in a couple areas that you might find in some of the more expat-y or, just some other areas that aren't as local. But that's also why I like it, because everything here is owned local. I buy my furniture from the guys down the street that make the furniture. I bought this shirt at a little, local tienda. It has a lot of art galleries. For some reason, this neighborhood has a high concentration of art galleries, which I've actually never taken advantage of, but I really would like to at some point. And it is definitely growing. We have more little coffee shops and more places popping up as we get further away from the pandemic. When I first moved here, it was smack in the middle of lockdown. Not a lot was open, but having the green spaces was kind of a lifesaver. So that was really nice. Mexico City transportation. Well, there's no shortage of that here, for sure. We have the Metro. We've got Uber. We've got Didi, which is another rideshare app. Your standard cabs, your feet, your own legs. We have Eco BCs. We have Metro buses. We have Colectivo buses. Everything you can imagine. And then some people have their own vehicles. I primarily get around. It depends on where I'm going. If I'm, in my neighborhood, I just walk everywhere, or I'll walk over to, neighboring neighborhoods if I'm going to the dog park or something like that. When I go to work at the immigration office, I leave at like 4:45 in the morning. So I always Uber during that time, but then I'll usually take the Metro home. I like to use the Metro as much as possible because it's just insanely inexpensive. Uber comparatively is also cheap, but $5 Uber ride or 100 peso Uber ride compared to a 5 peso Metro ride, which is 25 cents, is a big difference. I have tried to use one of the buses multiple times, but it never comes when I need it to. So then I just gave up trying to use it. The Eco BC system also is fabulous if you want to go somewhere that's close by, a little too far to walk, or you don't have the time to get there. That's another mode of transportation that I like to use. But I would say my primary is the Metro, my own legs, and Uber or Didi, one of the ride shares. So one of the things in Mexico City, when you think about a major city, you think concrete jungle, right? Tall buildings, you think Manhattan, you think Singapore, I don't know, other big, massive cities. One thing that's really unique about Mexico City is that even though it's one of the biggest cities in the world, there's still a ton of nature. We have it within the city. There's a lot of greenery, as you can see surrounding me. There's trees everywhere, tons of tree-lined streets, just gorgeous flowers. We've got the jacarandas that bloom in the spring. It's just gorgeous. But then we also have loads of parks. Bosque de Chapultepec, which a lot of people have maybe heard of in passing, but they don't realize the massive expanse of land that it actually is. It's, I believe, 4 times bigger than Central Park. It's the largest park in all of Latin America. It's got 6 sections. It has lakes. It has a castle. And you can spend days just exploring the sections of Chapultepec. It's also got museums within the park, surrounding the park. And then outside of Mexico City, just on the outskirts, there's a lot of hiking. There's a lot of nature. So for nature lovers, you can, hire an Uber or get a driver. And within 30-45 minutes, you can go hiking at Desierto de los Leones, El Ajusco, Toluca. You can go and see snow. Then we have a little bit south of the city, still in Mexico City, Xochimilco with the trajineras, where you get on boats and you go with friends and you have a party in the canals that used to be part of the city. I think that would probably be one of the most surprising things to people, because they come thinking they're just going to be, pounding the pavement, and then they're surrounded by all this beautiful nature as well, along with the beautiful architecture and the beautiful people and the beautiful food. Do I feel safe living in Mexico City? The short answer is yes. Very safe. Being a single female, I always am cautious of how I get around, what time of day or night, how I carry my belongings. I just try to be aware of my surroundings. Coming from the US and being a former teacher, you can kind of interpret that as you wish. I do honestly on the day-to-day feel safer here than I did there. But I also, I'm smart about things. I'm a well-traveled person, so I'm smart about things. I carry my belongings where, they're not visible. Most of the time, like if I'm just walking down the street, I do have the luxury of speaking the language too. So, I can kind of gather if something might not feel right, or if, there's a conversation happening that might make my, my little unsafe radar pop up. But for the most part, yes, I don't walk late at night. I know other people that do, and they have no qualms about it, but I wouldn't do that anywhere in the world. I take the metro by myself with my computer to work. I mean, in a bag. I've never had a moment, knock on wood, where I've been in a situation where I'm like, I'm really uncomfortable. I feel really unsafe right now. I want to get out of this situation. But yeah, the day-to-day, and especially in my neighborhood where I live, people know me. Everybody kind of knows each other. So that's really nice. And if I go into other neighborhoods that I'm not as familiar with, I just make sure that my belongings are kind of hidden, or that I'm, walking with my head up, just being cautious and aware, but nothing out of the ordinary. So dealing with the Mexican healthcare system, I find it a little bit confusing, but at the same time, really, really easy. So I don't carry any type of extra health insurance. I qualify for the basic state insurance, which is very, very affordable for residents. But I've never actually used it. If I need to go to a doctor or a specialist or to get blood drawn, you can do these things at the pharmacy. You can get a full blood panel at the pharmacy, very inexpensive. Specialist, very inexpensive, about the price of what I would pay for a copay in the United States. It's just very, very direct. I haven't needed to deal, on a higher level with, say, like a hospital or any major medical procedures. There's a fabulous website that I believe also has an app. It's called Doctoralia. And you can look on there for specialists. You can see where they went to school. You can see if they speak English or not. A lot of doctors here did train in the US, or in Canada or other countries. And so they do have a solid command of English. Again, I have the luxury of speaking the language, so that isn't necessarily a deal breaker for me. But I know that a lot of people have had the opportunity to find very high quality medical providers that speak English and they can communicate with them no problem. I have a fabulous acupuncturist here who is from the States. I personally prefer to use local providers, but in this case, we just really clicked, and so she's been my provider ever since I moved here. But yeah, I don't have a primary care physician. I have a clinic that's around the corner from my house, about a 7-minute walk. It's so easy. You can just message them and ask for an appointment. You tell them what kind of provider you want to see, and they have a whole list of various providers. They do have some English speaking providers on site, and it's super cheap. The other day it was 400 pesos for me to see the doctor. I had like sinus, ear infection thing going on. It's really nice here to be able to make your own medical decisions and to be able to access healthcare much quicker than where I come from without having to jump through a bunch of hoops. And it's definitely a lot more affordable when you're dealing with the basics. Once you get to the higher level of things, you're still going to be looking at some pretty expensive things, and it's important to consider your insurance costs and what if you have any medical conditions where you're going to want to have foreign insurance that's higher level than what you get as a resident. What do I dislike about Mexico? Not a lot. There's not a lot I dislike. Mexico City, a couple of the things I dislike are noise pollution. There's just a lot of random noises that you hear throughout the day. And I live in a really quiet neighborhood. And then traffic here. Sometimes the city's so massive that sometimes, and this is, also kind of a personal issue, but sometimes it can be so overwhelming to get somewhere else that you're just like, forget it. I'm not going to go to that event, even though I really want to. I don't want to deal with the traffic, or I don't want to get to the metro and take like 2 buses. Especially if it's rainy season and it's raining, it can be really hard to motivate yourself to actually leave the house. In Mexico in general, and this doesn't bother me as much, maybe because I'm used to it, or maybe because I myself am a little bit this way, but Mexico's very, time is a fluid concept here. It is not like mañana does not mean tomorrow. Ahorita does not mean right now. And these are things that I know and I learned sometimes the hard way the first time I lived here 20 years ago. But for example, I'm still waiting on an internet provider to come change my internet service from when I moved apartments 2.5 years ago. So these are some of the things that people really can struggle with. They are like, oh, well, I need to have something done tomorrow. And I'm like, yeah, that's not going to happen. Unfortunately, you are on their time, you are on their land, and you're going to have to adjust. But other than that, there's not a lot I can say about Mexico that I do not like. I mean, I truly love this country. Almost everything about it. The people, the culture, the food, just everything. It's a fabulous place. So some little gripes here and there. Daily life for me, there is different every day. A lot of my life revolves around these little monsters. I've got 3 of them, not on purpose. They just keep landing in my lap. So living here, I'm actually what's called a consul with Internations, which is a international community organization. And they have different groups and a variety of events. So I try to stay really involved with that because I'm not only meeting locals and building relationships with local friends, but I'm also meeting people that live here from all around the world. So that's been a lot of my social activity. I also have built a really great community just here in my neighborhood. And my neighbors and I have brunches and we have events together. My daily life really depends on, as an immigration specialist, it really depends on if I'm at the immigration office or not. If I am, that requires me getting there at like 5 a.m, and I'm there for most of the day with my clients. I'll send my dogs with a dog walker on those days. On the days that I'm home, I send one of the dogs with a dog walker because she's a puppy and a lot of energy. And then when she gets home, I take the pups out. We'll go to the park. In regards to food, I'm more of an eat out or order in type of person. I cook a bit, but not as much as I probably should. We have the luxury of having so many different food delivery services here. I also am kind of a creature of habit, so I tend to go to the same 4 places and order the same 4 items of food to eat every day. or else I'll go out to eat with friends. Mexico City is one of the largest gastronomical cities in the world as well. I'm not a huge foodie, but I'll go to socialize. A lot of really awesome restaurants with terraces or outdoor seating. Just to, get outside, very or pet friendly as well. So a lot of times when I go places, the dogs will go with me. We'll walk, to a restaurant. I'll meet my friends for lunch or dinner. Every Sunday I go to church. I am Catholic, so I have the luxury of having a Catholic church on every corner in Mexico, pretty much, to choose from. So it kind of depends. There's a lot of convenience factor living here in Mexico City. Everything's just right at your fingertips. For example, here's a fabulous example. This morning I woke up with a migraine. 6:30 in the morning, I sent an order on the app. It was delivered to my house at 8 a.m. and migraine free by 10:30 a.m. So it's there's just so much convenience here. A typical day in Mexico for me, there isn't really a typical day because my schedule varies on when I'm meeting clients, but on average, I would say if I'm going to the immigration office to work with clients, I get up really early. I'm at the immigration office around 5:36 a.m., in which I take an Uber, spend the day there, and then I'll come home and take my dogs out for a walk, probably go hang out at the coffee shop across the street. I get a lot of my socialization at the coffee shop across the street. It's a really cool place. They do events. It's a fabulous spot. There's just so much to do here. So it kind of depends on the week, kind of depends on, on any given day. I could have 15 different events to choose from, or I could sit at home after taking my dogs to the park for a couple of hours and just chill on the couch. Struggles. I'd say one of the struggles, probably the biggest struggle I have, is just communication. Just things here. Communication here is a different thing. For example, I can have a provider of some sort. My dog walker, for example. I'll tell him, hey, please make sure to message me before you guys are coming back because I don't know if I'll be home, and I'll let you know where to drop off the dog. And then I'll get a message that says, hey, we're at your house, and I'm nowhere near my house, and I have to scramble to find someone to let my dog in or something of the sort. And that happens a lot with just kind of service providers. How has my life changed since moving to Mexico? I'd say it's definitely slowed down quite a bit, or just become a lot less stressful. In the US, I was a teacher, which is just an insanely stressful job in general, but I also don't have the same concerns that I did there. Like, I don't really care where I shop. I just kind of live a more authentic life, I guess I could say. I feel like I have more genuine interactions with people, and I put myself out there a little bit more to meet new people. And I've learned a lot too. I've lived here off and on, over the years, but you just get to, especially here. It's such a metropolitan international city. It's fabulous to be able to interact with people from not just different cultures within Mexico, because each state and each part of Mexico has its own, special culture, but people from all over the world. So yeah, I feel like I have the opportunity to give back a little bit, and I feel like I am also taking care of myself a little bit better. So if a person is interested in moving to Mexico, they know they want to move to Mexico, one of the things that you have to do is apply for residency, and that process starts outside of Mexico, but then it needs to be finished at an immigration office in Mexico. And a lot of people choose to use facilitators. I myself am a facilitator here in Mexico City. I offer 2 sets of services. I offer a pre-consultation for people that haven't started the process at all. They're starting at 0, but they know they want to come. And then I offer the Mexican side services where I guide you through everything in regards to finishing your visa process at the immigration office, completing your documents, going with you as moral support. Here in Mexico City, we're not allowed to actually go into the office, and helping you just through that entire process, streamlining it for you, making sure that everything is done correctly the first time, so that one of the biggest decisions that you're making in your life and one of the most bureaucratic procedures that you might have to experience goes smoothly for you. I also offer services helping people that maybe want to move to Mexico City but aren't sure, providing them with relocation tours within the city, taking you around to the different neighborhoods, showing you which each neighborhood has to offer, kind of the price point for those neighborhoods, and just giving you kind of a general what life is like in Mexico, Mexico City specifically. And if you're interested in learning more about either of my services, getting my info, you would be able to get that from the Mexico Relocation Guide. I am listed as one of the chosen facilitators and tour guides in the Mexico Relocation Guide. And I hope that you, if you do choose to come to Mexico and want to check out Mexico City, go ahead and contact me and choose to utilize my services. And if not, at least make contact, let me know how it's going, and let me know what you think of Mexico City.